I'm a game developer and I love Nintendo. In this video, I'm going to try and design my own games for a few of Nintendo's biggest consoles. And we're starting with the Nintendo Entertainment System. The NES was Nintendo's first home console, boasting retro graphics, 8-bit sound, and countless instances of brotherly love. Now, the NES does have its limitations. Look, no Barry told me. The main limitation is the NES can only handle 2D graphics, and I'm a little bit of a 3D artist myself, but 2D, I hate 2D. Okay, here's my idea. This is Asteroids, created in 1979 by Adam Sandler. This seems like a good starting point that we can then add a twist to later. It seems appropriate to start with the ship. Here it is, Asteroids. Okay, there's a few more features we need, like the rocks, shooting, particle effects, but that is basically it. I also made the rocks look like Burg because I thought it would be funny, but it wasn't that funny. Sorry. Anyhow, this game is called Super Hexagon, and the point of the game is to spin your triangle thing around this hexagon thing while avoiding more hexagon thing. You get the point, there's a lot of hexagons. So I want to try and combine our Asteroids game with this game, so instead of just rotating around the pivot, you'll actually have to fly around the hexagons like a maze. I'm going to go and purchase Super Hexagon just so we can get an idea of the gameplay. Whoa, hold on. You almost just caught me buying the game on Steam when I could support the developer directly. In the indie game world, this is punishable by death. Alright, let's give it a play. Okay, we're in Super Hexagon, playing it so well. About to make my own version with Asteroids as well. This game's really easy. We need to make it harder. How am I doing this? I don't have a father. The first thing I noticed from my research is that the ship in Asteroids is not the same as the ship in Super Hexagon. So I used 100% of my brain to come up with this. I know, just hold the applause. I also made 2 more sprites with some flames so that we can animate it flying around, and here's that in game. Currently, the space that the ship is flying through is completely dark. Now, this isn't quite accurate, as real space is kind of like Instagram. It's full of dying stars desperate for our attention. So I thought it might be fun to try and make a starry parallax background. Parallax is the concept of moving different layers in a scene at different speeds. This gives us the illusion of depth, as you can see here in Terraria. The objects that look the furthest away are moving the slowest, whereas the objects in the foreground seem to be moving quite fast. So that's what I want to replicate with our stars. I started by placing a bunch of different pixel colors around a canvas. As you can see, one of the benefits of the NES having these limitations is that I can get away with this looking like absolute shit. Here's the background in game. To get our parallax effect, I move the background in the same direction as the player, but at 20% of the speed, which looks like this. But at this point, you might notice a slight absence of hexagons, which is a problem. I started by creating a simple sprite with a hole along one of its edges, and then brought that into the engine and got to work on collisions. Next up, we need to create our gameplay loop by slowly scaling the hexagons down and adding some rotation. And look, I'm going to be completely honest with you guys here. I didn't know if this game idea was going to work. I was kind of just winging the whole thing. But surprisingly, it's actually quite fun. So with my newfound motivation and ego, I designed a few more hexagon sprites and made it so each one has an equal but random chance to appear when the hexagon respawns. Okay, so to incentivize people to actually play this thing, I've added a score counter that rewards you every time you successfully dodge a hexagon. Now, besides some fun experiments I want to try, the last thing we actually need in order to finish this game is to add some sort of difficulty modifier that increases as you play. Luckily, this is pretty easy. All we have to do is create a difficulty variable and increase it by some amount every time we dodge a hexagon. So now, as time goes on, shit gets real fast. Okay, so there's a couple of extra experiments that I want to try. The first one is adding music. I have this licensed music from my game Barji, so I decided to throw that in, and it fits the theme pretty well. Better than Barji anyway, I don't really know what I was thinking with that one. I also decided to bring the Asteroids back, as I thought it might add a little extra challenge, and it definitely does. I also gave them smiley faces, but that didn't make the cut. And finally, I made a main menu, and that is our first game complete. Meaning we have conquered the NES, the most high-octane NES game ever devised ever. I don't think anyone, not even Nintendo themselves, could craft such a masterpiece. But before I show you console number 2, this portion of the video is sponsored by GameMaker. A 2D, easy-to-use game engine used to create some of my favorite indie games. And hidden somewhere in this video, there are 7 keys that will get you free access to GameMaker Pro. Don't worry if they've been snatched though, as GameMaker has an incredibly powerful free version with tons of great features. If you're new to game dev, GameMaker has these templates which will get you set up to make your very first game, and they even have an asteroids template which I used earlier on. If you're a little more advanced though, GameMaker's suite of tools covers pretty much everything you need to make your dream game. So be sure to download GameMaker at the link in the description if that tickles your fancy. Thank you GameMaker, back to the video. Alright, console number 2, the Nintendo 64, home to classic games such as Super Mario 64, The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time, and a personal favourite of mine, Space Station Silicon Valley. Best game on the console, go play it. Now, there is some good news, ladies and gentlemen. The Nintendo 64 does have 3D capabilities, so forget that last game, because this game will be my magnum opus. They will hang this next to the Mona Lisa and list it as one of the most culturally impactful video games of the 21st century. Burg 64. The idea here is that I'm just going to plagiarize all of these games and add in a monkey or something. I don't know. So here we are in an empty project, and the first thing I'm going to do is try and download some models from Mario 64 so that we can use those for the prototype. So I found this model of Peach's castle and imported that into the engine. Ah, I know what's going on here. This is because our normals are flipped. Normals are tiny little vectors that determine the color of a pixel during the rasterization phase, usually represented as a column vector with 3 elements. You know what, it's fine, I didn't even really want to tell you anyway. Anyway, that's fixed now, so we can start making our character controller. And we've got a ton of options here. Maybe Mario, I mean, he makes the most sense, right? Toad, what an absolute classic. Wait, who the fuck is Mips? Okay, listen, I've played Mario 64 all the way through, and I don't once remember seeing this motherfucker anywhere. Friendship with Mario is now over. So here's Mips in game, let's try and get him moving around. Speedrun time. And here's Mips moving around the level. I've tried to stay pretty true to the Mario 64 physics. There's also jumping, as well as the ability to jump higher if you hold down the A button. I can't really show you this, so you're just gonna have to take my word for it, I guess. I then added in some basic camera controls inspired by Mario Odyssey, and that's all we need. So say goodbye to Peach's castle, as well as our beloved Mips. And say hello to Burg. He's a bit of a celebrity around here, and he's our protagonist. So let's just slap some animations on him, and here is Burg in-game. Pro tip, if you're making a 3D platformer, add one of these shadow decals below the player. It really helps to navigate while you're in the air. Okay, so that's basically it for our character. I think it's about time we designed a level. I really like the idea of setting the game on an island, so I modeled a really basic island in Blender. But the good thing about making old games is that I can just use any texture, no matter how bad it looks, and literally nobody can complain. I then made a second disc to act as the water around the island, and wrote this shader to change the color based on how shallow it is. And finally, I made it so Burg can swim. I mean, just look at him. Doesn't that just make you smile? Next up, we need a skybox. So I found one I had lying around and downscaled the fuck out of it until it looked like a Minecraft painting. Here's that in game, and I definitely think this already looks pretty good, but we're definitely missing something. Trees. This one is a little high res, so I'm going to use my signature trick and just... Perfect. If you're enjoying this or want to see me make games for other consoles, then make sure to subscribe, like, and comment down below what you want to see. The final change I made to the island was adding a mountain in the middle. It has this winding path around it, which came straight out of the old noggin, as well as these small rocks. Okay, so that's pretty good for now. Let's start on the gameplay. Obviously, we're going to be collecting bananas in this game. I mean, come on now. And I made it so that running into one of the bananas increments this counter in the top right. Now let's be real, at the moment this is basically just a glorified walking simulator. So I decided to up the stakes a little bit by adding these boulders that roll down the side of the mountain. And if Burg touches one, no! Next up I made these mushrooms, and I can already hear the comments asking, why are they square, Barji? Well, there's a simple explanation for that. It's because I'm lazy as fuck. If we place some of these mushrooms together, we can make a little puzzle for our player. Although, I guess it's not really a puzzle now, seeing as I've just shown you the solution, but... New addition! Ice block. This will make Burg slide and move faster than usual. I also made a little course out of them and scattered in some bananas. Oh, and apparently Burg can also respawn now because he couldn't do that before, apparently. The final thing I did was go away and make this parkour section, which features mushrooms, spinning hot coals, and moving platforms. I then brought this to the island. And finally, I changed the resolution to match the N64's original resolution, which makes my art look even more passable. Which means today we have not only conquered the NES, but also the N64. Watch out, other consoles, because I'm coming.